Today's episode is about caregivers and how the caregiving has influenced our work as set designers. We were so glad to have some familiar voices back into the scene shift groove. So I hope you enjoy listening to them. I'm Maureen Weiss. I'm a performance designer.
I'm Sibyl Wickersheimer.
I am a set designer, and I had the pleasure of working with Sibyl on the book, Scene Shift. This book is about conversations between theatrical designers, specifically scene design. We have been really interested in continuing our conversations with set designers, discussing where they are now, where they want to go, and what they bring to the practice of set design. We want to continue that practice of talking to each other because it is such a solitary art form.
This podcast grew out of that continued interest in conversation and the support of our creative producer, Taya Chura.
Please join us today. So thanks everybody for coming today. So we've got Naomi Kasahara, Jellinek, Yvonne Miranda, Louisa Thompson, Collette Pollard, Chen Wei-Liao, Lien with us today. And I think we're just going to treat this as a roundtable. If you all want to just introduce yourselves, just one or two sentences about how you fit into the world of design or theater or not any or either of those. So I'm just looking to my left, and that's Naomi.
Hello, I'm based in Los Angeles area, like Maureen and Sibyl. And after grad school, I started working a lot of shows in LA area. But now I'm teaching set design, so that's my main thing.
Louisa?
Hi, I'm Louisa Thompson. I identify in the theater world mainly as a set designer. I'm a professor at Hunter College, and then I also identify as a visual artist working in fiber.
Yvonne?
Hi, my name is Yvonne Miranda. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm actually both a set designer and a costume, but I haven't gotten set design work in like almost 3 years because I think people forget that I do both because I do my costume so well. So I'm based in Chicago right now, and some projects I have is the first world premiere of the first all-Black performed, written, and composed opera coming up at Chicago Opera Theater, and I'm working on North American premiere Hymn, Hymn, at Chicago Shakes, and that is going into tech tomorrow.
Lee?
Hey, I'm Lee Jellinek. This is my first one of these things with all of you because I wasn't around when it was all happening in the book, but I'm in New York, and I was a designer, and I took like sort of a few years off, although I was still technically doing shows, but not a lot of them. But I'm kind of back, I think. I've sort of decided in like the last 6 months. So I have a bunch of stuff coming up in the fall, all in here.
Colette?
Hi, it's so nice to see everyone and meet some new folks. Collette Pollard, she, her, scenic designer. I'm a professor at UIC, or University of Illinois, Chicago, in a BA design degree program, design function technology program. I've opened a couple things. We opened Titanic the musical in the Round for those playing law. And then we opened, and I say we because I also own a company called Co-Design, where it's about bringing in several designers to work on projects. They're often more commercial projects, but we did a show because it was like a late ask. And that was Henry Johnson's Mammoth, which is very controversial here in Chicago, understandably. But we did it through a company because we needed more collaborators to get it done on time, and did it really due to the connections with director. And then, I have some things coming up. Also Chicago Shakes, which is exciting because I haven't worked there ever in my 25 years of being here and working with Rome Sweet Rome and the Q Brothers in the fall, and have a couple texts coming up this summer, but at a different time, maybe this call, maybe a different call. The reset is also happening personally, just like really reflecting on all things in terms of design, storytelling, etc. So it's been an interesting 2025.
Chen Wei.
Hi everyone, I'm Chen Wei-Liao, and I'm in New York City. And this is gonna be my until August it will be my 10th year in the US, and I'm like, I think I did something. And then I'm currently working on the Mrs. Herm and Mrs. Watson Apartment 2B by Kate Hamill in the Arizona Theater Company. I'm so excited for that. We're going to tech soon in a month, and also at the same time working on a couple of other project, like immersive thing and different things, and pretty exciting and celebrating my 10 years.
Mimi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mimi Lien, she, her pronouns. I'm a set designer. It's so nice to be on this call and see some people I've known for a really long time, but never have a chance to talk to. So, came from a background in architecture, but I have worked in set design really, mostly for the past, I guess, 20 years or so. But I have had the good fortune of having a couple of public art projects and sort of in the built environment, which is something that I've continued to be inspired by, like architecture in the built environment. So that's something that I've been grateful to have a couple of opportunities to do and hope to do more of in my practice.
Wow, this is an exciting group. There's so much I'm so curious about from all of your perspectives. On this end, I feel like I've had kids on break for about 5 weeks, it feels like. None of them hit the same break period. And I'm getting texts about my mother's care right now as I'm staring at this thing, as well as I'm going into another tech rehearsal tonight. So some of this conversation is about that, but also there's just some thoughts about how I'm curious about whether anything in your upbringing or background or from your parental background led you into this career as a set designer or designing in theater. So anybody that, I don't know, wants to speak on that large thing that I just said.
I may kick off with, my dad is a structural engineer, and I never really thought about the connections to set design until I have questions about how something's built. And often when I ask questions, find that I wish that we partnered with structural engineers before arriving at the theater, rather than relying on a structural engineer, technical director type person at the theater itself. Because I think it's so intrinsically connected how you might put a set out there in the world. And so I find myself wondering, had I recognized that years ago, would that have changed how my practice would have started?
I see it in your practice though.
My dad is a structural aestheticism advocate, which means he looks at buildings specifically where the structure is part of the design. You'll see that like in glass buildings where the structure is really articulated and quite beautiful, and has been his focus later in life. That is definitely something that, we all probably are very aware of because it's an efficient way to build. Well, we are probably often asked to be efficient.
I can offer up that my grandmother was a maker and probably a performance artist without being a performance artist, and did a lot of things when we were kids that were, I think, kind of like prompts and events that like sort of got a lot of people doing something or working, being in an event together. It's a long story, but in short, she had a doll that my cousin thought was ugly, and she named this doll Ugly. And then for years, there were these ugly birthday parties, and there was this, completely like, I'm going to say like cocktail party meets treasure hunt kind of thing that would go down. And I think that got me to theater somehow.
Yeah.
Because it was really magical and also outside of all the lines of what people's expectations were. People would talk about stories about things that would happen. It was a very big part of me wanting to be around people making things together.
Yes, I have something I want to share as well. So my grandpa is, so back in the time, like 20, 30, 40, 50 in Taiwan, there is no architecture. This is not a job. How people build houses is they go to a master, and then the master has a lot of apprentices, and then it's like family business type of thing. A master with a bunch of his apprentices in concrete or in structure, like, anyway, it's a group of people. And then my grandpa is like, so my family is the master family, and so since we were kids, since my dad was a kid, he has to work in the construction side and all that. That's their childhood. But anyway, when I was a kid, my grandpa already retired, but I still saw all the fun things tile at the third or fourth floor of our house, and I just kind of like to play with it. And then there's a tool that used to break the tile. It's like a key, and then and then the tile break. I love to play with it on style things, and then I got into trouble. But anyway, and then I really like to. I guess I really like the tools, and I really like to see them making things. Because even though they retire, they still try to let's renovate this part of the house. And then one day you will see a bunch of bricks and the concrete and the stuff they just brought out, and then you saw them just doing like a weekend family activity. And then my uncle, my dad, my grandpa, they were just doing stuff, and then voila, a chicken school or a something, because we also have a farm, and they just built something there. Even my grandpa even used the PVC pipe to make staircase railing. He just used a torch to like point the fire at the PVC pipe to bend it or to do something. I was like, is that even okay? And then on the new wall, like the last vertical thing, he used like a kid size basketball, so not like a real size, small size basketball, and then he put concrete in it and then put it on the new wall as the finished top piece. And my cousin, because we were all so young, my cousin didn't know that his basketball become part of the architecture. He used his head to bump into that, and then had a giant bump in his forehead. It was really funny, and I think this kind of builder maker thing is just in our family, and I really liked it. And my grandpa does encourage me to draw, so I like drawing then. So that's my little family story.
I love your family story. I mean, that seems like a gold mine of sets right there.
It was really fun.
And so when they see what you do now, is it not surprising?
Maybe because I was the wild child and the youngest child, so they kind of just let me do whatever. So they're I don't think they're surprised, because I did tell them in a very young age that I want to be a designer, and they seems to be okay with it. It's like, okay, bye everyone, going to America.
Has any of that shown up in your work, Chen Wei? Like, do you notice that, like, I'm designing this corner over here and it looks like something my grandfather would do?
Maybe. I do really like to play with different material. And there was one time my really longtime friend, he told me when he saw the design I did, is always can see the architecture hint, but not exactly architecture, because I don't really want to do that. But he said they can see some hint of pile of stuff. You invent something in this corner, and then and the other corner there is that. It's like boom, boom, boom. I tend to put things like a collage style, I guess, into one picture, and not necessarily very. I'll say magic realism. Maybe that's my saying, because I'm a little lazy as well. I think about this idea, I'm just gonna put them together.
Does anybody else see like reflections of things that like you were surrounded by as a kid that end up on the stage, and it's only like during a preview that you're like, I just stole that from my childhood house, or that looks like this in that way? I'm just always seeing awkward things that I realize
I can't look back that far.
No,
I'm too old. I can't look back that far. I can't remember.
We just want to wash it all. We're not trying to revisit.
I mean, I can share. I think a lot shows up on stage based on my mom, who I lost this past February. And she was a Las Vegas showgirl in the time, in the heyday. I mean, we have some pictures that would be embarrassing to show. You know, it's good. They're actually amazing to show. And she was there with Jimmy Durante. We have a picture with her and Farrah Southerbo with him, and Sammy Davis Jr. and Fred Astaire. And so it's like a very sensationalized, magical time in Vegas. And that's part of her story. So she was a mom after that time in her life, but that story shows up because she was a choreographer and a performer, and I went to the back of a lot of high school auditoriums, sat in the back row, my happy place. I think I'm in good company, mid to back row, you know what I mean, I think. And it was about big story, big picture, and spectacle. And so I think a lot of that shows up. And what I'll specifically say that I have a love for is like actually performer. It's interesting that I actually haven't done more concerts because I'm very interested in storyteller as narrator, I think. And that's because I was just around it a lot. And it was glamorized, as it should be. So the idea of bringing that kind of glamour to storytelling and showcasing a performer is always really exciting. So sometimes I get to do some work, like with co-design, we're going to be supporting it's a medium in Chicago called Footworks, which is it's a street dance essentially that's had a history here for 30 years. And we're supporting a performer in his opening exhibition by having a space that's installation as well as performance space. But this idea of really surrounding yourselves around and storytelling around a single artist is really exciting to me personally, and that just shows up in a lot of storytelling in general too. So yeah, that's a little bit about the influence that I know it had on me as a young person in terms of what I do now. And I also was never allowed, I was also the youngest. I don't know that I got away with stuff. Maybe I did. But I was not like allowed, I wanted to like build a treehouse in the backyard and I got a big NO, but I was like, but I have a sketch. And so I joke about like I'm always, still as an adult fulfilling my wanting to build my own dream house. But I think that actually really influenced my curiosity around wanting to make things as large as life and embody them. But that's part of the blocks that also I can have arrived to who I am.
I feel like I can see it in your work.
Well, that would be interesting to talk about at a different time.
Thanks for sharing that, Collette. I did not know that, so I would love to spend more time hearing about your mom.
Anyone else come at it from the performance element rather than building? I think that's an interesting difference, Collette, for many of us. I mean, I think the instinct to when you see somebody building and working and making, it's sort of, that feels very natural to all of us.
So like I see reflections, like my mom, our house was full of paintings, but in every painting there was a person. Like it had to have a person. It was a painting of a person. They're all people. And so like she has to be surrounded by paintings of people. But my dad, he was an engineer and then a lawyer. And so I see like there's these two sides of what I do that sort of allows that mixture. And I like hearing that there's like this personhood to it, because I forget that is sort of part of what we do is central to this personhood and not just the sort of engineer background that my dad had, which I often reflect on.
Yeah, and I don't know if people grew up with performance, but also I danced piano for 20 years classically, right? The performance was way before set design for me, but I didn't love being in that place. Like I love the form, but I didn't see a life of me being on the stage. And so also just like, what does it mean to be performer on stage as musician, as dancer, as singer, I still to this day am fascinated with the marathon of performance. I mean, what it really means to share a story nightly in front of people and be present over and over and over again. I'm constantly blown away by our industry. I think it's pretty miraculous.
Yeah, well, marathon is a really good way to describe what we do. Also, maybe as parents.
It's running this marathon.
Would anybody else like to respond about how caregiving has impacted your work? So from the other angle?
Well, because I don't get to do set as much. Everybody always is like, oh, I didn't know you do set. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. Until they go to my website. I definitely feel like it comes a lot in handy when I do costume. Just because we're working with performers, there definitely is a night and day when I do set, because I don't have to deal with people's bodies and using that as their tool. And sometimes, honestly, I prefer to do scenic because I don't have that human element, because you just have, their actors are just like regular people. They have a lot of personal opinions about their clothing, and they project a lot of those things that we normally do, like insecurities, all of that, onto that. As opposed to when I do set design, I don't have anyone coming to me being like, I don't think this character would have this kind of crown molding in her house. Versus like, I don't think I would wear these shoes. you know? So it's kind of like, especially when tech is going on, I'm just sitting there as a set designer, like, yeah, you need to like fix that door, or like, you know, can we finish off adding like some gloss to the floor, as opposed to costume design, which is like you're always there beginning and end through the whole process. And so being a mother, being someone who was the oldest child, I am so used to having to take care of people and kind of put myself on the back burner to make sure their needs comes first, which sometimes, you know, is a problem for a lot of women because we've always been raised to be nurturers. We're given baby dolls to play with instead of trucks like the boys. And so having that kind of background growing up, always taking care of people, it comes a lot in the costume side of things that I do, because I want to make sure that they feel like they're in a safe space. They can trust me, because at the end of the day, if they don't want to wear my designs, it's like I can't force them to do that. Like it becomes a whole other issue. And so, yeah, I think that's where I see it more versus like the technical side is, I don't know. It's just, I feel like it doesn't register the same way because there really is kind of like no human element like that when you do costume design. So other than like trying to make sure people are safe, like if you have some type of like rake that they need to have like a physical therapist there for, and just other things like that. So I feel more of like disconnected actually when I do set than when I do costume, because I guess I'm so used to doing more costume design.
The disconnection is very real.
Yeah, I guess when you sent that question, I found myself just thinking a lot about time and schedule. I think when I was pregnant, and I remember having a conversation with Lee about this, actually, like, how do I be a mother and a set designer? And I think what you said actually was very true. Like, I think what you said to me was that, like, things became much more surgical, right? Like, you're set aside this amount of time to do this, and you got to do it. Otherwise, like, then, you know, you have to go off and do something else. So, but I remember thinking and hoping that I would fold in the child or children. Turned out it was children too. So before I knew it was twins, I was like, I'm just going to bring them to tech. Like, I'm just going to fold them into my life and incorporate them and continue doing what I'm doing. And then I remember the day that I found out that I was having twins, and I like sort of started crying a little bit. I think I started crying because I was like, wow, this might mean the difference between that plan being possible and not possible. Like, bringing two babies is not and it turned out to be not so possible. So for the first couple of years, you know, like, oh yeah, I thought I was going to bring them to tech in Berlin, and like we would all go. And then at the last minute, my husband was like, this is not going to work for me. Like, I'm going to be the one, you know, taking care of the babies when you're in tech, and we're going to be in this unknown space, you know. So, yeah, so for the first couple of years, it ended up not being what I thought in terms of incorporating. But now I remember maybe just one moment when they were like 2, 3, they're 7 now, and they're like playing with blocks and built up this enormous tower, and then, you know, spent a lot of time and attention building that up, and then like immediately just knocked it down with like glee. And I don't know, I found that to be so instructive, like for me, just recognizing that, like, I don't know, it was so like sometimes I think it's not so easy for me to just be like, tear it down and start anew. And I remember that moment, like recognizing, like, this is great, like this is so great that they can do this. So I think the folding in has happened in other ways.
I think in theater, generally, all of us in our different departments, unfortunately, I feel like it's one of the few industries where, like, being a parent and juggling that is not easy, because usually places, like if you go to a corporate office or something, they might have daycare or you can arrange that, but just because our schedules are just so wonky, because we're either working like multiple shows or like you're a professor doing this, it's not something that I feel like has been able to solve. And especially being someone who was on our union, like LORT negotiation committee, there was a lot of, I'm going to say it, like demoralizing things that like witnessing that, like trying to get quality of life incentives in there that were just like knocked down because they're more worried about their bottom line. And so not recognizing that we're not machines, that we're people and we have lives outside of that, and not trying to accommodate that just because it's more worried about money was like just very sad, as opposed to like some other industries where they're more accommodating to that. And especially because like sometimes if you work commercial, you're working 10 out of 12s, or, you know, you're working 6 days of tech. And I feel like the only reason I'm able to do what I do is because my husband has a regular job and he can pick up like the slack when it was like that. I'm very fortunate right now that my children are like teenagers, like one's already out of the house. He's he's in the Navy, and then the other one is like he's 15 and we got like 3 more years. And so when I actually entered grad school, I was the only one with kids. I was like 33 and I had 2 kids, and people were like, how are you going to do this? But my children were still older, and it was a thing of sometimes having to like leave grad school to go pick them up, take them home just to drive all the way back because I had like tech for a show or something like that. And so I just feel like this industry is not very kind to parents in general. And if you're there with a baby, I've just heard horror stories of like women being pregnant and being disrespected while trying to do their jobs, or not realizing that, you know, they're caregivers, or are you, you know, coming at them like that. And I think COVID has really highlighted a lot of that, where, you know, we were getting sick, and a lot of times we have to fight for like assistance, and us not having that was a big red flag, because they'll have understudies, but, you know, they won't accommodate us, and then it's like everything's thrown out of whack. If like the sound designer goes down, or if like this goes down, and there's nobody to see that project through, and you would think there would be like more accommodation for that to plan if something happens, because, you know, it's life. We can't be there all the time.
Just with the COVID stuff that I was sick for a while, which is why I wasn't hanging out. But what it turned into was like this sort of enforced break. And now I had a lot of like zombie shows that were still happening that I would be around. But now, and this is only possible because like we are in my insurance, but I'm not like the main financial operator in this household. That's why this is possible, but that I'm like re-entering very mindfully in terms of the kids. So like, and it started really because I wasn't well enough, but like I'm kind of holding to it that now I just like I leave tech at dinner unless we're going to do a big transition that is the set. And I have an associate. And like I used to use all my associate money in the studio, and now I use all of it in the theater, so that I'm like home for dinner and I can go to the baseball game. And so far it's good, but also like that I think before, I mean, I was like at full speed when we had our kids and just like continued at full speed until the pandemic. Now it's like, this is for me. Like, I actually don't want my kid, like I don't really want them in the studio. One of them is very interested, but it's like, I want to go to your baseball game. I want to go to your like D&D thing, and I want to like go work on a show and not see any of you. And it's sort of great. I'm also like, it timed out because of their ages. They were 4 and 7 when the pandemic hit. So now they're 9 and 12. So we're so close to them being like in the next, like the big one's self-commuting to middle school, which is amazing. And we have like maybe 1 more year where we really need a babysitter around, you know? So yeah, it feels like I can actually, it's like, I don't want it to have anything to do with my kids, actually. It's like, that's what I got.
It was interesting because when I was thinking of this, I realized that I think the design is my self-caregiving. It is my moment where I can say this is for me, until, of course, tech comes and something goes wrong with my set, right? Those moments feel like, oh no. But I'm starting more and more to think that that's the gift I gave myself, to have this space a little bit. But you're right, Yvonne. It's also like, it's just not, they don't witness a stable career really path. They just see up and down, but they also know that when they hear that I'm going into tech, that's their moment for a breakdown. They know that after I've got a 16-year-old and it doesn't matter. They know I'm going into tech, they're going to have a meltdown. Like something melts right as they go to tech. I can count on that. If I've taught them anything, it's to dread the word tech.
My kids love tech because they want the snacks. They're so disgusted by text where there's no snack table.
You're really good at bringing them. I am so bad at it. One, they don't like it. And I just am like really bad at focusing. And the one moment that I got the look from the director when I did it, like after that moment, I was like, I can't. But you're really good, Sibyl.
I had thought it would continue that way. Like I really did. I brought them around the whole country, to be honest. And then it started to break down now that they're 12 and 15, and the 15-year-old, she's got her own thing. She's got high school, and she's really paying attention to studying and being in class, and you can't really pull them out that easily. So, and I respect that. But I will say that they look back and it's taught a lot of respect for my work, that they had to sit there and be quiet, and they also witnessed me, with trying to find us a friend who was the babysitter who would help me while we were in all these locations. And it didn't always work out. And Olive still talks to me about the one guy that I fired. I came home and I told him never to come back. And Olive and I had a really honest conversation about how it went down. And then I brought them to tech with Bill Rausch. And at the time, Otto was probably 4. And so it was like 4 and 9, 4 and 8. And I just said, Bill, I just fired my babysitter. The kids are here with me tonight. And he looked at me, and I just gave him a note. I was like, I can tell you more, but I'm just going to need your support. And he was incredibly supportive. And all the actors, like some of them heard that, and, and they just like helped. But then I had heard later that people were talking about me like, no one's done that before. No, we're not used to that. And it's gone badly for others. I just want to warn you. I heard that from a couple staff members. And, I think I made so much, we make so many choices to get to, where you're actually designing, and putting myself out there in the world as a very like masculine female in order to navigate shops and builds and being a scenic painter and working and I always had this hard exterior that I built up in order to do that. And having kids really brought me back to being a feminine person. I've always been a feminist, but like having kids has really made me, regardless of what my gender might be, it's brought both sides together so that I can actually be more fluid in the world and be more accepting about schedules and more accepting about, when things don't go the way you think it's going to go. Like, that's what you learn having kids. Like they'll break the building you just made, or they'll turn your thoughts on a dime because they have needs that are real, that are right then. And I think that's been so good within the world of set design and stepping back and going, this set isn't working, but like, maybe that's okay. Let's figure it. So it's made me a much more flexible and fluid person that's more grounded and able to see humans differently. So I really appreciate that I've had to go through that. And now that they're humans who are like, nah, we don't want to go see that show. I brought Otto to the taper to see Fake It Till You Make It. And we had and it was not really an appropriate show for an 11-year-old, but we sat there and we were like gossiping about the set and like the performers, and then afterwards we both decided together that we liked it. Like that's what I want them to love theater. I don't necessarily want them to do theater, but there's a respect there, and I think that's what has happened by bringing them, and now I can kind of release it and let them go their own way.
That's so funny because I brought my oldest son to see Hand of God when I was doing it, which is very inappropriate. Being that I was in the Marines and I have, not to sound like gender bias, but boys, I'm always very, even if I had a daughter, it's just very upfront with how the world works, because I feel like a lot of people try to prepare their children for how they want the world to be and not how it actually is. And I'm just very like upfront with my children. That way they have the wherewithal to like navigate the world, and they don't have to make the same mistakes that I did because I had no one guiding me. And so, I don't feel bad about taking it because it's art, but also it's just entertaining and it's just the way it is. And I don't believe that that's going to like influence my children to just like go sideways and end up, being, a bane on society. So I do like to bring them so they can see how stuff happens like backstage, and they're very fascinated by it sometimes. Like, the Christmas Carol, which is all kids kind of love that because it's a ghost story. And so they're just like in awe of like, how did that person come from there and that? So it's kind of fun to like discuss the behind the scenes and, reveal that to them. And they're just like more interested. So it makes them interested in what I do. And they think it's just really cool sometimes. So it's kind of funny.
I've been like sitting here thinking about how to not say this with an edge of bitterness, but I'm going to try to put it together anyway. My kids are now teenagers. I have one going to college, and with the little bit of space that's starting to form, I'm also like really seeing, like I'm having a lot of grief around these moments through this whole period of being in the theater, being a parent, teaching, where I like couldn't do any of those three things really the way I wanted to the degree I wanted to, and I'm sort of pissed about it. I'm currently working on a little pop-up in a festival, and I was talking to the director yesterday, who's also a parent, similar age kids, and they couldn't afford to fly me there, so I'm doing some like help with the set design. And we were talking about like just what that feels like, because I really gave up doing like regional theater when I had kids, and what I loved about regional theater was that it was like a residency. Like I loved those hotel rooms, I loved being in the bubble, I loved that I forgot to pay my electric bill, I loved that like I was just there. Like, somebody would call me, my then boyfriend would call me, I'd be like, who is this? Like I would just love being 100% in something. And I think it does work for my brain to be able to be that immersed. And I feel like I'm trying to like shift out of like the feeling of having been sort of denied that, and still kind of trying to show up in all these spaces and places, and now trying to figure out, well, what does that look like now? Like, can I fully disappear for like how many weeks until they like resent me and I have to send them to therapy or whatever? But like like what is the amount of time that you can spend immersed in something, like truly immersed? I feel like that, at least from talking to other artists, is a really kind of sacred thing. And I don't know if as much as I love saying that my kids got something out of seeing a working mom, or like, the backstage moments of seeing the table with weapons, that was like a big one for my kids. Like, those are experiences for sure, and I'm glad they had them, but there's not quite something, like our society doesn't let us be immersed in something for like a long period of time. Like we're always juggling, and like, so maybe that's where it's something I'm trying to figure out now. It's not a bitterness about having made these choices, but it's more like, how do you pull that freedom back? And, and how do you dislodge it from the financial realities that like make that also just totally impossible. So,
that's why we went to Narelle. It's a lot of that conversation is how she made that choice.
Yeah, I've had that convo with her too. And it's like, it's a different practice, but I feel like in a way theater has sort of decided as a professional space to not support the artistic side of that all the time, of like, sometimes things just need time, and like you need to get lost in something and not be on a schedule that's getting increasingly shorter every time we take a show.
Or an immediate negation of the work, right? As you're working through it, it feels like someone walks in and says, are you really going to have that there? Is that going to be something? So yeah, I really would like to have that longer discussion, Louisa, because I agree.
Residencies.
Yeah.
I'm all about the residencies right now. They're great.
One of the reasons I just looked over and realized like the only way that I've made it this far is because of Naomi Kasahara. When I first had a kid, Naomi, before I had my baby, Naomi was my assistant. And then I had a baby. And Naomi became my assistant and my babysitter. And it was like truly a gift to be able to have that person, because I really couldn't have done it. And it had to be a babysitter that understood that I was just going to be like, I got to go do this thing. And if I couldn't do it and my kid wanted me to stay, I could say, Naomi, can you go? So I looked over and was like, this is really important to me that you know that, Naomi, and that we all needed a Naomi, and I just luckily had one. And then Naomi had a baby and had a career. So I've watched that. And so I just want to hear how that's gone for you a little bit. Because you saw me do it and then you had it.
It was actually a big help that I saw you, how you did it. And then, your both kids are, very, into art. They enjoy watching mom's work. And that was my pleasure that, it was like a big family, joining your project with your kids. And I learned a lot, like how mom can deal with job and being mother. And so that was my learning process before I actually have my own kid. But it was hard when, Maureen's daughter, late at night, she has to go to rehearsal, but she literally cried and chased mom. So I was like, oh, what can I do? And I don't want to pull her back, and I know Maureen's already hard. So that was like, I still remember the hardest night.
Yeah, those are hard nights, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it happens for every mother, maybe dad. But my daughter is 8 right now, so she's still, I think it's too young to stay till 11 p.m. And she has to go to school, 7 a.m. next morning. So I'm juggling right now. And I have tech week next week, and she's already crying about it. Maybe same as everybody's case, but I was so curious how everybody deal with the situation. And then one day I had nobody that I can ask to watch my kid, actually pick up from school and watch kids until I get back. So I asked my neighbor, and they said, okay, we are good. But like next morning, my daughter told me, like, Mom, please don't do that again. I hated it. So like, okay, so what can I do now? And every day I'm trying to, for that day, okay, today's plan is this, but I don't know if it can be same thing again next show. So every day I try to manage it, the best day for the day, but it's not only this job, but especially theater world. We work till really late. So having kids is, I really wanted to hear everybody how deal with the situation. I'm still learning what's the best way to do it every day. But maybe I get brave like Sibyl. I just take my daughter to rehearsal night and see what I can do next day.
I mean, I will say that I don't, even though I brought them with me, I never brought them at night to tech unless I absolutely had to, because sleep is so important. So we still tried to set up like, a system, and it's still today, there's a lot of like, I teach at USC, so I will drive, pick up, have dinner, do stuff, and then I'll, try to get them ready for bed, and then I'll head out back to school. And if I have to go to a rehearsal, I think there's a world where we are so necessary in the room, and it goes to the residency and like the continuity of thought as you're working. And so you really do have to be so present for long periods of time. And yet one of the things we have to be able to do also is like hand off the set to the team that's there. So in some ways it's a lot like, as the kids are getting older, you need to release them into their world of either like taking the bus to school, or, in our case, it's been walking home, which, it's LA, but it's nice out most of the time. Like there's occasional rain, but walking is not something you see a whole lot of kids doing for far distances. And I think it's okay. So I just have said, I can't get you today. You have to walk home. And they do it. So, but at night, it's a little scarier. Like, how do you go to the rehearsal and not? I don't have an answer for that one, except you do have to take it day by day and then spend a lot of money on babysitters.
It's okay, Naomi. It's okay, like, for it to be hard for Hazuki at times. Like, that I had to just be able to sit with, they went to play Mountain Place, which helped me to just say, yeah, it's hard. I'm really sorry. It's really hard. Like they still know. And that's why they have the big feelings before tech, because they're like, okay, it's going to be hard. And I let them have the feelings, but I'm still going to tech. Like that's my job. But it's, so I'm just giving you the strength to know that hearing that is hard, right? Because we want to do everything for our kids. Like we don't want to hear that. It hurts, right? So then we need to find our own place to cry after hearing that. But she's okay. You just let her have those hard feelings, but you're not doing anything wrong.
Right.
It's a lot of guilt. And it just sort of going back to Louise, what Louisa said is that you feel like you're not doing anything well, like you're not parenting well, you're not in tech well or designing well, and you're not teaching or doing whatever it is. Or maybe with your partner, you're not, present either. And so that is it's a real problem. But I don't also have an answer for that, except I like that what Maureen said, which is, they might have to actually get through the hard times.
Did anybody ever have that realization of like, because I used to try to go home for dinner to tack, and it just made everything worse. And I was like, actually, it's really just better if I stay. and I would find out over time, and maybe this is helpful to you, Naomi, that a different groove would happen with my partner and other caregivers, and they needed space to develop that. Like if I was constantly interrupting them or or I got needy in that some way, it would really be even harder for them. It was actually easier to just be like, we're in this other mode for a while. That part was fine. But now I get texts from my husband that, I've got 8 teenagers entering my house that are shown on the Simply Safe. And I'm like, oh, this is like a whole other level. This is not just my own children that are alone at home. There's like a whole bunch of other kids there. So there's always something about not being there that you're going to have to figure out, even when they're independent, You're like, don't trash the place.
This was very interesting.
If you have any follow-ups, please reach out. Thanks for joining us.
I actually want to say something for a while because I'm a single person, and when Sibyl sent an email about this rounded table, I was like, what can I offer? And I thought about it, and I think, okay, what I can offer is as the control group, like here, this one. No children, not dating, not planning to date, not planning to have, when I went into this business, well, that was when I was 18, that was many, many years ago. I am kind of just preparing myself, have this mindset that not gonna marry, not gonna have child, not gonna care about men, not give a B. And I think I want to share my respect to all of you, because I know how hard it is. I'm not even doing it. I already know how impossible, how difficult, and I know I can't handle it. And everyone here is just heroes and heroes and heroes. How hard that can be, I'm not even gonna try. And if you ever need any help, I'm here, but not gonna try to have one. And I thought, and I asked myself this question when I was very young, am I okay with it? And I guess even till today, I'm still, maybe I'm a little selfish. I want to do my thing. I want to work on me or what I'm interested in. And instead of thinking, I don't know, that could come from families too, because single parents and I'm very fucked up. I don't have a good image of family, like not giving a again. But when I come into this business, I know I'm gonna be single. I can date, but whatever, not gonna have child.
It is interesting though, the messaging, right, that happens. I think, wow, I would have been this is such a gift to put together a conversation around this, because if I actually had this before I had my child, it would have been really supportive and informative, because the reality was I was like looking around the landscape that I was surrounded in and I was not seeing it. So I think, Sibyl, you're the first person I met that was identified female scenic designer with kids, and it's only because of OSF telling me such, right? And so I think if I heard Mimi correctly about like, oh, when you asked that question, I thought schedule And then I hear questions around schedule about, I was really inspired to hear Lee say like, and then I just leave and now I'm spending it on associates in the theater, which I just did for the first time in this weird trying to say no to a show that really needed people around it. And because there was more of us, we had more time out of the theater, but just hearing that part of it. And then also just hearing like, what are ideas? How do people do this? I mean, 10 out of 12s being gone are such a blessing because I can actually get up at 5:45 to get the kid to school without being a total sick train wreck, which I would just get sick every tech with the 10 out of 12s. And, and then I was sitting here thinking like, yeah, how has everyone done this? Because it's all in very different ways, I think, but it would be what a great resource for people that want to have family or people that are being, or like don't want to have family because they're like, yeah, how are you doing that? But, it came really clear that the world worked from 9 to 5 for a reason. And, that was really early on, very clear. And so I was like, okay, I have to how do I cover like school pickup to like 5 so that I can be focused in a work situation, because that 3 o'clock or that 2 o'clock for some, it comes so fast. And that's been, whether helpful or not to other hope to be parents or parenting, is like really covering 10 hours for me, 10 to 5 days a week was like gold. In terms of really feeling like I could, to Louisa's point, not, I wasn't in residency because I had somewhere to be and a family to take care of, but it gave me the time to be in the space that I needed to be in to do the job in a way that I didn't feel like I wasn't being a good mom, wasn't being a good designer, wasn't being a good teacher, because the joy that your children get to see in what you do, although hard doesn't mean bad. But if you're going and you're miserable, that's one thing. And if they're seeing that, that's messaging something to them. But if you're going and you're enjoying it, yes, still tech, meltdowns to some degree, whether they're not really meltdowns, they're like confusion. Like, why am I upset? Oh, wait, mom's schedule is weird, is a reality. But I think I'm breaking this like place with my son where he said like, I said, buddy, he's like, why do you have to go to tech? And I was like, well, I have to use this. He's like, oh, okay. And I was like, oh, that's the shift. There's the moment of accepting the part of me. And if I was going kicking and screaming, which I'm not, I'm very happy to go to tech, he's seeing that. And it was so important to me to bring this back to the very beginning, to see a parent that I felt saw joy in his work, my dad, and I saw struggle in my mom trying to do her work, right? So I already started to learn the lesson as a young person really quickly of what it means. And I didn't know I was the reason why that made that challenging. But I definitely know now that's for a mom, she wasn't able to do as much in the world that my dad was able to do. And it was a given, like that's just how it goes. But to see like joy with work and sadness with work really affected me. And so now, I hear the word navigating too. I think it was, Yvonne that used that word. I hope I'm remembering correctly, but it would be so nice to get this conversation to a point where we're like, what are the options? Not what are we navigating? There are options, but what are they? Because no one's talking about them, but this group is, and that's exciting.
The using of your assistant money, if you can try to shift that balance so that you're using it to help you cover not, the evening tech rehearsals, or either for paying someone to be at tech or paying for somebody to be with your child, is an interesting solve. And I definitely find myself going to that direction lately. But then it means more of the drafting, model making, and so on either becomes back to our responsibility or we don't get it done.
So we are trying to do this model that you seem to be doing, Collette, so we should talk to you more about it. But we have been trying to just call it scene shift. So if Sibyl and I can't really take a full job, we have enough resources around us that we can just say this is kind of like how DOTS is doing, but it's designed by all scene shift. But what we're noticing is they still want a name. Like that, there's a lot of resistance. They want the personal. So that's a longer discussion that I would love to have also that we're running into. But I think that's the only manageable way, to keep our careers going. I just think that's one of them.
Well, what I was thinking as I heard Collette talk about co-design is actually that the word co-design is more descriptive and pretty straightforward. That is a helpful tool, maybe.
Yeah, so maybe we should figure that out. Figure our wording better.
I don't know. You have a lot figured out. I mean, here we are talking about it. That's pretty impressive. Just to make sure it's said, and the gratitude that was expressed of like, I don't have kids, same gratitude, just gratitude for finding where people intersect and where there's connection and what they're trying to manage to be artists, you know. And I just think that's pretty amazing.
Respect, all my respect.
Thanks, Chen Wei. I'm so glad to see you all.